Welcome to Pull Up and Pour, the podcast where you pull up just as you are, pour whatever's in your glass and heart, and join the conversation. This is your happy hour without the pressure, a space for real stories, real laughs, and real talk. Whether it's wine, water, or a mocktail in your glass, what matters most is that you're willing to share what's on your mind and in your heart. Because here we say it, we sip it, and we share it. In this space, connection flows best when everyone's welcome. So pull up, get comfortable, and let's pour into some conversation. Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the sixth episode of Pull Up and Pour. The name of this episode is called From Gut Feeling to Algorithm: Recruitment Then and Now. We are going to be discussing recruiting, okay, and what it looked like before AI and what it looks like now that AI is here. So I want you to welcome my esteemed guest, Tiffany Walker. Tiffany Walker, actually, I've known her for many years. I met Tiffany in 2005, and we actually are both recruiters. I recruited as well. And that's how actually I met Tiffany. I actually was a consultant working on a project, and she was, there, and she was one of their lead recruiters. And I got to know Tiffany, and we formed a connection, and have had the connection, since then. So it was only fitting, that when I decided to do this, as opposed to talking about recruitment, that I brought in the pro. She has well over 20 years of experience, as I said, a very, very esteemed, and has an illustrious career in recruiting. And so Tiffany, and has recruited in different verticals. Okay, so without further ado, Tiffany Walker, take it away. Tell the audience a little bit about you.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name's Tiffany Walker. I do apologize. I do have a Lauren Bacall raspy voice. So that is just something to take note. But again, thank you, Keisha, for the introduction. Just to go back in regards with what steered my career within recruiting, talent acquisition. It was something that I honestly more or less fell into. My undergraduate degree, of course, was in telecommunications, which dealt with television production, and then moving on with a master's in education. However, with going into getting my undergraduate degree and coming out of college in the undergraduate capacity, I was able to fall into recruitment. And it more or less was initially in a customer service call center environment where I supervised a call center, and then was put on a responsibility of recruiting and bringing on other customer service representatives, where I would be responsible for the recruitment process and hiring and bringing them on board. So with that responsibility, from a supervisory customer service orientation, then put me into a role of recruiting for representatives within a call center, and then got me very interested in the platform of recruitment. So from there, I was at PBS, Public Broadcasting Service, which was located in Virginia. Stayed there definitely over 8+ some years, then moved on, migrated with an actual staffing firm where I recruited for various different Fortune 5 companies within the DMV area. And then from there, we moved on. So it dealt with from high volume to specialized recruitment. Started definitely um, early 90s, and then moved on throughout my trajectory, clearly into 2004, 2005. So I'm excited to see the growth, the cultivation of how recruitment has translated and moved into talent acquisition. So again, that's where my career started. Wasn't initially looking into recruitment, but was able to get a task where I loved dealing with folks, engaging with people. So that's how I went into recruitment.
Okay. Well, one thing I just also wanted to, just to bring up. So when you are saying recruitment, what is the difference, would you say, in the word recruiter? We touched on this briefly, recruiter as opposed to talent acquisition or talent acquisition partner. Is that just another way of saying recruiter, or are there really two different meanings when you say recruiter and then talent acquisition?
There is, Keisha. Thanks for addressing that question. Recruiter or recruiting and talent acquisition are two different functions. When you think of recruiting is definitely more tactical. It's more hands-on, dealing with processes. So it's more or less, let's say, for example, if you have to hire 50 custodial workers, that's more of a tactical, where you would already bring in, you're going to interview, you're going to set up maybe, certain pre-screen questions, and it is a tactical process. So it's more or less, we're dealing with volume, we're dealing with bringing people in, we're drug screening, where again, it's tactical, you're able to measure it. Where you get into talent acquisition, it's more of an engagement. It is not just tactical processes. Engagement will deal with more of you definitely interfacing, focusing, and really dialoguing with the actual candidate, going and honing really into those skill sets, making sure that those skill sets are in tune with the parameters that your particular organization is looking for. So if you look at talent acquisition is preparation. It's building your pipeline. It's allowing the organization to know that if there are other future positions down the road, you are being very proactive with understanding and knowing that the organization may need a certain type of engineer down the road. There may not necessarily be a requisition that is current, but you understand the mission, the scope, the skill sets that the organization needs. So you are now preparing, you're having your pipeline, you are talking to talent every day, you are engaging talent every day. So that's the difference. Recruitment is a quick fix. It's very tactical. When you think of recruitment, you can think of sort of in an example of military. It's your goal to go out to recruit young individuals to join the Marines, so to speak. That's a task. So we're going to go out and we will do a fast, high volume recruitment type of focus for that particular position. It's not a lot of engagement, but it's fast paced. We know what we need to expect. We know the ramifications. We know the specific skill sets. A lot of times it's not necessarily unique. It's a matter of minimal qualifications. And if that particular candidate has X, Y, and Z, we can hire in volume. So that's the difference. When it comes to talent acquisition, it involves more niche type of skill sets. It involves more massaging, more nurturing, more pipelines of candidates for future positions. So it's being proactive as opposed to being reactive. So that's the difference with recruitment and talent acquisition.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Thank you. So now this one is going to kind of take you back a bit. First, I did not say it earlier, but I'm going to say happy belated Mother's Day, first of all, to all of my mothers that are out there, okay, who have not watching now, maybe watching this episode tomorrow. And for all of us who enjoy a good happy hour and a glass of wine, happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Happy Monday. It's casual.
So jumping back, I want to take this, back before actually AI, back into the 90s. So back then when we, recruitment, you're kind of doing recruit. What are some things that you find that you did and through with the hiring process when we look at in terms of what that looked like was, I mean, I think at this point, LinkedIn wasn't even a thing,
Yeah.
LinkedIn wasn't a thing, automation, none of that was a thing. So what were
Yeah,
some avenues that, you used or that worked when we're talking back then, and then, we're going to kind of bring it back up.
definitely. Thanks, Keisha, for definitely bringing that up. When you think of recruiting, it's definitely evolved from, and when you say, let's just say pre 1990s, or even there was it was a manual. It was a relationship based, paper driven type of process, into a fast paced where it then folded into AI. But when you just think of the past, pre-digital, and this is how I look at it. Before pre 1990s, there were you just think newspaper classifieds, print advertising, and local in-person networking. So the way that recruiting was back then, and I remember it so vividly, we were literally contacting the newspapers. In my particular case, I worked in the DMV. So we were contacting the Washington Post, other local papers, the Baltimore Sun, Virginia local papers, where we were actually meeting deadlines to put in advertisements for positions. We also did local job fairs and in-person networking.
Ah, remember
So
that.
that was really, a major mass difference where, again, you're meeting deadlines, you're contacting, publishing companies were really relevant and making a lot of collaborative teamwork with us and networking, because a lot of times we'd have deadlines, we'd have to contact, the newspaper or a particular publishing company at a certain deadline to be able to get our advertisement in. And again, there was a lot of local, job fairs, in-person networking, applications, were physical papers, and filing cabinets were your databases. So that really was your pre 1990, so to speak, face. So again, it's your newspapers, your classifieds, your applications were physical paper, and again, filing cabinets were your database. So if you can sort of get an eye view or a picture view of what it was pre 1990s, it was really a pre-digital era.
Okay. So now, back then, how much of recruiting would you say relied on kind of like your gut instinct, like your intuition, or as we would call it, a gut feeling? How much of that relied on that back then, would you say, recruitment?
Prior to, believe it or not, and then you were saturated, because again, you were getting lots and lots of resumes based on the ads. It was really you as a recruiter. You had to still hold into your job description.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you had, and sometimes you would have assessments. We would still have certain basic assessments, but again, assessments is not going to delve into, let's say, the characteristics internally of a candidate.
Right.
So your gut would be, which it was, and which I still love, it allowed you to really have that engagement, that verbal conversation, where that recruiter had to really understand, know the job description, work with that hiring manager to know other probing questions, to be able to ask that particular candidate to see if they understand it. And again, you're playing sort of Russian roulette. The gut feeling is you'd still have your pre-screen questions based on intakes because you're communicating with that manager. So you're going based on, again, your understanding of the job description, your collaboration, and your meetings that you're dealing with your hiring managers, coming up and cultivating questions that when you're discussing and talking with the candidate that you understand that was your gut, so to speak. So it's pulling in your team, pulling in your hiring managers, you as a recruiter understanding that job description, anything that you didn't understand, going beyond and making sure that that hiring manager gave you that information so that when you went back and you manually had to have specific questions to be able to address that particular candidate. And then you'd have answers because sometimes, like people say, well, how would you know if they're saying the right or the wrong answer? That's that communication, that's that dialogue you would have with hiring managers. If they're saying, for example, Tiffany, we're looking for this particular engineer, but this particular person does need to know, has to be certified with Cisco, what have you. And if those are those specific elements, you would have to customize your questionnaire based on the feedback from the manager
Mm-hmm.
and your feedback and your understanding of the position. So back then, I think the candidate as well as definitely the recruiter had to be in sync and
Oh yeah.
understand the position itself. So as they moved away from dealing with managers or what have you, they had that individual collaboration with the candidate. They were aware of the type of questions to ask
Mm-hmm.
and get the feedback. So the gut feeling, believe it or not, was just really based on you communicating with the hiring manager, getting the proper manual answers and understanding, and hoping the candidate is going to respond with the right questions and so forth, be able to provide you, the right detailed information in their responses. And a lot of times it was my gut from that initial screen, and then you would involve your managers. So the initial pre-screen would be you based on certain questions that you have already discussed with the hiring manager,
Mm.
and then based on those specific questions that would definitely tie into that unique particular position or within the industry, to be able to give you a knowledgeable base if this particular person does meet those particular cuts to move on to the next phase. So your gut instinct dealt with definitely your communication with the managers, your knowledge, your know-how, understanding the mission of the organization, understanding the positions, and going from there. So yeah, it was gut, but again, it was pull and collaboration. But you had to do a lot of it was manual.
Very
So
much so. Okay.
your AI may have been able to pull up certain specific questions. At that point, it was very manual. So you were going to that manager and saying, what are, when you're doing your intake, they still do intakes today. That's the dialogue that you are communicating with that manager to get definitely the understanding of the position. What are the highlights that you're looking for? What are, what are the ones that are going to break the deal? What is it that if this particular candidate says this is what they understand, then you're like, no, Tiffany or Keisha, this is not the candidate that we want. So
Okay.
dealt heavily with your dynamic with your hiring manager and your understanding and your research, but it was manual.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now that we are going to kind of, I want to ask you a little bit about in terms of some of our younger recruiters today versus, some of our more seasoned recruiters. So, what are some things that you think that recruiters used to look at, us more seasoned recruiters used to look at in candidates that some of our younger, maybe less seasoned recruiters today may not even think about looking at?
You know, let's just look at it from this stand. The newcomers are definitely already submerged in the digital shift. So they're accustomed already with being born into the internet and being introduced already to job boards, like monster.com as an old
Mhm.
one. So
Yeah.
for the newcomers, it's already there for them. They don't really have to initially do a lot. When you think about it, AI has initially done the initial pre screenings and things of that nature. What I would say to recruiters today, and I say recruit because you have to work to become a talent acquisition specialist. That takes time. That
Hmm.
takes time with building your candidate pool, really understanding your positions, already having those conversations with your hiring managers or your hiring executives. What I would tell a new recruiter today is to, as you rely on artificial intelligence, because it's definitely going to navigate and screen, but you still need to make sure that you touch that candidate, that you allow that candidate to understand that Tiffany Walker represents Booz Allen, and that it is not just robotic, and that they're just not getting pushed emails from artificial intelligence. And companies and organizations, they do want, as much as we definitely still want that AI, because it does spit out a lot of, analytics. It definitely does. It deals with how we understand algorithms and things of that nature. But
Hmm.
what the younger recruiter does need to still understand, not to lose face of the candidate, that
Mm.
you still touch that pulse to understand the temperature, to understand that candidate. If you go blindly just based on communications, assessments, and not really talking to the person, and I mean talking, not via email, and you're chatting via email. The,
Hmm.
that, the recruiter today does need to understand that they do need to tap into that candidate that they truly want to present into the process. And sometimes I think that's overlooked. Treating applicants like customers,
Mm.
that's the key. So when you were asking initially, you know, what do recruiters need to know today? They need to know exactly that.
Hmm.
Our candidates are still, you have to treat them like our customers.
Yeah.
They have to be engaged. They do not want to feel ghosted. So, although you do have AI and they're bringing in pre screening questions and they're able to, definitely, because you want that. Recruiters at one time in the old, we used to have to go through thousands of resumes. I mean, you were flooded. So, you do want that mechanism of being able to, funnel out resumes that may not hit the mark. But those
Hmm.
that do, when they're presented, I think the recruiter today still needs to understand that they need to touch that pulse, as I stated.
Yeah.
They need to still contact that particular individual, whether or not you have a profile or not based on AI. There needs to still be a communication,
Hmm.
not just standard communication, meaning where the interview is going to be, not the logistics of just saying this is who the panel is going to be if you're having a panel interview, not just providing that. AI does that too. What we still need to understand is that we had that human touch prior to the 90s.
Hmm.
Still had to talk and communicate with that candidate. That still needs to be present and visible today.
Mm. That makes so much sense. It makes actually perfect sense because that's one of the things, that you hear now about not hearing anything. It's almost like it's kind of like this black hole, I think I was on LinkedIn maybe this is about maybe a week or so ago, maybe even a couple weeks ago, and that was the one of the things that was being talked about. It was, I guess, a person who was a candidate and was complaining about that, and I think it was, somebody who was, probably a hiring manager or or a recruiter who indicated for the most part, kind of like, in a certain amount of words, like, kind of get over it. And, if you kind of mention that, then you're kind of like looked at as like this spoiled sport, or, that type of thing. If if you bring it up. But my thing is, see, I don't look at it like that. My thing is, okay, so when do we start holding people accountable for bad behavior? Now, my thing is, I do understand it because I've been there, in terms of getting, several, hundreds of emails for one role, and you cannot answer every single one. I do understand that. But I mean, like, to the point of you don't even send, kind of like I call them a Dear John letter, just like nothing. I mean, if you're not going to get back to somebody, at least send them a notification so they are well aware that they, thank you them for their time, but they just were not selected this time around. I mean,
That's
you get
where
them,
AI is wonderful.
mm-hmm.
You just said that's where AI, and we've been doing it. When you look at various different ATS systems, even before AI
Yeah,
really
do it automatically.
done, we were able to, depending on your applicant tracking system, you were able to implement various different custom messages. And you're
Mm-hmm.
absolutely right, where there were generic messages that were turned on where you were at least acknowledged that your resume was received.
Exactly,
And that
exactly.
it depends on your organization, your company, what they're putting in. And we were already doing AI, honestly, a little before, because we were able to, depending on your applicant tracking system, we may need it to manually, and you may had to partner with your info technology department, and depending on that, but there are functions where you're able to at least get a general custom message with thanking you for applying.
Right.
You're going into our talent market, so to speak. And lots of organizations and companies definitely have done that, and they're doing that. And they have always. Sometimes there are cracks, that are there, and lots of candidates are slipped. The good thing with AI that I love, and which does, at least when it has picked up, it has picked up the pace where you are at least acknowledged. May not necessarily be a human being, but you are able to now receive email communications that's acknowledging that your resume has been received and that it's being reviewed. There's also communications now where it's not from you, but it is generic communication. And I've sat there where you're not interested. You get your more or less, unfortunately, you were not selected for an interview. It
Mm-hmm.
is. But again, it is still that recruiter, or talent acquisition specialist. It just depends on where that phase is. Again, recruiters are tactical. It's things that need to be done. We've got to hire 50 people. We've got to do X, Y, and Z. As long as they meet these minimum requirements, boom, they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Go through an interview process. But again, it's not where we're looking at a niche type of skill set. So in certain parameters, it works. From that, where the human touch may not necessarily come into play till at the end. But when you are dealing with various different positions around the country, around the world, it is very critical that a recruiter taps to that individual. So when you're dealing with volumes and you're saying, well, I've got 50 people, Tiffany, that have applied, I've got to narrow it down to these 10 individuals. that I
Mm,
talk to. Then out of those 10 individuals, I then need to send to my hiring director or hiring executive the top three. Your homework has to come in. At the end of
mm,
the day, people say AI makes talent acquisition specialists, or if it's a recruiter, lazy. No, you choose to be lazy as a human being. AI is a positive function that can clearly work for you. And
mhm,
you have to take the extra step, the extra initiative that we've always done. We've always did the human touch.
mhm,
It's getting on that phone
mhm,
sometimes,
mhm.
shooting an email and saying, "Look, I really need to talk to you. We need to have a conversation. You've been selected to meet with our executives. I want to talk to you, tell you a little bit more, really about the organization, how our people really enjoy working here. Let me
Mm,
just parameters." So the recruiter sells themselves short if they leave that piece out. So when you say, how do you reach out to young individuals coming into the industry, understand and know that every candidate is someone that is worthy and qualified to come into your organization. And if so, you are the representation, you are the voice. So although we have AI that is going through all of the other parameters, that's then going to get that recommended candidate to you. That's the good thing that we love AI, because it's
mhm.
no longer you or me saying, "Oh my God, we've got 500 resumes. How am I going to get through all five? Am I going to
Right.
do, okay, I'm going to do Russian roulette. I'll do the first 10 that and at that point, it may be biased because you
Mhm.
may be over, a particular candidate. You may say, okay, I'm going to do all odd numbers right now that come in. So the first 30 candidates, I'm going to do 1, 3, 5, what have you. That's still somewhat of a bias mindset. You don't think it's biased, but when recruiters are trying to somewhat be strategic and they're choosing how they're going to be choosing resumes, it's still somewhat biased
Yeah.
from that standpoint. So what I always recommend that AI has always it's a tool that it's not going away. So we do need to understand that it's not going away. But to use AI as the tool or as identifiers to at least get individuals that have passed the initial screenings. And I'm talking about all tier levels.
Okay.
You as a recruiter, you cannot not communicate with that candidate. Whether we know Gen Zers, a lot of people don't like to talk on the phone. Like, oh my God, who's calling me? Depending on the role, and I'm being serious, you want to have a conversation. And I'm going to end
Yeah.
it like that. Yeah. But we know how Gen Zers are. Like, they don't like to talk to people. It's like we're texting. You've got Gen Zers that are recruiters that are like, and everything's through text communication.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Organizations, they understand. They're looking for specific skill sets. They know what they want. So the tables are turning now where they want those conversations.
Yeah.
Recruiters got to be tech savvy. They've got to know how to read analytics. They have to know that once AI has done everything that they've done, you've got to still make that extra call. That's like when we think about cars. You're
Yeah.
like, you don't have to drive yourself. But look, we just saw a lot of those cars ride over a cliff, right?
Mm, mm, mm.
Don't necessarily stop. They don't always have human intuition.
Right. Very true.
So that's what we have to remember. AI definitely does bring up patterns, how we think. they look ahead. They're not real time. It's not that, but it's smart. They do look at, AI looks at dynamics. They look at the algorithms and, based on these particular patterns, then this could be plausible. As a recruiter, you cannot depend strictly on AI.
Very true.
If comes to you, Keisha, says, I want to interview Tiffany Walker. You'd be insane to not ever talk to Tiffany Walker.
Right.
And you're basing it all just on the AI. Yes, that can give you your profile. You can submit that information definitely to the hiring manager or the hiring executive. But you would definitely want to talk to that candidate. And that's where I think the trend is moving back to. It really is. Recruiters cannot be lazy. It's called talent acquisition for a reason.
Right, you're dealing with talent, exactly.
Tactical. There's no longer just tactical processes. It has to be strategic. You have to start having a candidate pool even prior to positions coming out. So recruiters have to embrace, or talent acquisition specialists have to embrace, understand the mission, understand the type of talent that the organization needs and wants. And you're still doing that day in and day out. Not waiting on just a requisition, but understanding and knowing. And that's where recruiters and everyone in the fold, you and I, have to understand. It's that pipeline. Pipelines require engagement, face to face or on the phone, true engagement, not automation, not artificial intelligence.
Well said. Well said. So I just want to, kind of process that, and then, kind of move into now. Here's something that I know that a lot of, people out there are interested in knowing. We all hear about the algorithm and, kind of beating the algorithm. And, what are some, like, first of all, like, what does that mean to try to beat the algorithm? And then, secondly, what are some practical ways that candidates can really optimize their resumes so that AI systems actually pick up on them? Because, what I am, beginning to understand is that many times it is about your experience and what you've done, but it's all about how you are able to be seen by this algorithm. Okay, so if you have all this wealth of knowledge, but you may not have the right keywords, and so then you don't get picked up on, and then you're kind of passed over. Meanwhile, you're great candidates. So what are some practical ways that candidates can kind of like optimize their resume so that AI systems actually do see them and notice them?
Well, what candidates need to understand, and I think they may have already known this, if not, one resume is not going to do it. You and I have always known
variations.
You may have 10 resumes in your pocket. Your curriculum vitae are no longer working. People are not doing CVs. And we used to know what CVs versus resumes. CVs, remember, they were your 3 or 4 pages of bios. Sometimes CVs do work depending on if it's academia and you're, a professor or someone within an institution. But the way that it's working today, and what I would recommend with candidates, is to, which I've always said, and again, it's always been a part of the process, whether it was pre-digital or even up to date. But what candidates need to realize is when they're applying for a particular position, first of all, This is Recruiting 101. Research the organization. Understand and know the organization's profile, number of employees, what they do, things of that nature. The position you are applying for, those individuals, the hiring managers, or the team. Most organizations and companies do have they have their organizational structures of their departments. So do your homework. So if it's where you are applying in a particular department, who is head of that particular department? Find out that information. Understand and know how that organization or that company works. How does your particular department, what does your particular department do that interfaces with the overall mission of the organization? Look at that particular job description and understand, because again, it doesn't need to be wordy. The way that it is now, recruiters, we're looking at one page tops, maybe a page and a half. But
Mhm.
it is now where they are looking at boom, skill sets. So you look at clearly what that job description skill sets are. AI is going to already have buzzwords. You have to customize. And a lot of people get it because they know how to do it. They're very creative where they're able to, if there's a particular software that you need, a lot of times you can, as they say, redline, you can look at that because that's exactly what the recruiters are doing today and the systems that are up. They're able to, based on AI and resumes, they're looking for keywords, key, statements, those types of things. So an individual does need to look at that particular job description, hone into those key elements, making sure that those key elements are on that resume. Doesn't have to be a lot of textual or text information. Does not. Needs to get right to the core. If there's accomplishments, the number of, if you met a certain goal, you put the number in. It's just as clear as that. So it is definitely it's about your accomplishments. It's using your key buzzwords that are even within that particular job description. Now, what's funny, and they do it in academia now, AI can be overly used. So,
Mm.
you can clearly be like, have every buzzword that JD has, and you have it in your resume. And they're going to be like, ooh, I want Tiffany Walker because X, Y, and Z. Be careful. Because when you put that in, you've got to back it up.
Mm.
So their AI does make it easier for candidates. You have to know that JD, understand and know the job description. Then you customize. That's what's going to get you out there. Looking at what that organization wants. What are the keywords? What is the particular skill sets? What are the specific software that they're saying you need? You could put that particular software, but if you put that particular software, you better know it.
Because you're going to ask you questions. When you make it there, you're going to ask you questions.
Absolutely. So I think it's sort of easy. It's an easier type of way of getting into at least an interview. I think back in the day with you and me, it was harder. You didn't necessarily know all of the dynamics. With AI, it allows the candidate to be extremely more visible. But again, the recruiter still at this point is like, that makes you really more in tune to want to talk to that candidate.
Right.
Resume may be too perfect. You know what I'm saying? It's got every freaking buzzword. And I'm just saying, I'm being laid back.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting now that that's where we are? That we no longer can look at a resume and say, wow, this is an amazing resume, Exactly. And I mean, now the first thing that kind of pops into one's head is, oh my goodness, does this person really know, or like what's going on?
And that's
This
where
is
you got
AI. It's too perfect. I mean, I I mean, if we
got it.
speak about where we are today, I mean, it's absolutely incredible, but incredibly scary too, to a
It is
certain extent. That we really can't. It's to the point where you really people
out the
second guess everything. They have to, almost to a
us.
certain extent. So it's like it's almost like AI is to a certain extent a gift and a curse, if you will.
Yes. Like in academia, you see it now. You and I have my son that goes to school. I've looked at where professors are able to check to make sure students are not necessarily utilizing AI. That's where it is. Because AI can do draft your papers. But
Oh yeah.
now professors are trained and they look to know if it's an AI function.
That cadence, certain things but the scary thing is that as much as what they teach them, they now also have software that can,
Tell that
kind
you
of go through and
like
tailor and move the sentence structure around, okay, enough so that it doesn't look like it is, and now one nothing is 100%, but it's interesting that now they do have different AI software that will make it so that it is very, very close to being undetectable. Okay, I mean it's scary
but what
on both sides.
I would say be careful because the checker watches the checker watches the checker.
Yeah.
So understand. And they're very, and as far as for a candidate, at the end of the day, understand and know this. It will maybe only be your entry level jobs. And I'm not saying ones that are like AI, whatever, they're going to be gone. But let's just say hands on type stuff. You may be able to navigate and get through that process because it's hands on and they may do some training. But what I would recommend with any candidate that if you have sensationalized your resume and now you've been notified by Tiffany or Keisha, you've talked to us and maybe you have your notes where it's going to say maybe the right buzzwords or what have you. But I always say to a candidate, you're doing yourself a disservice because you may initially, and I say this when I and that's where us as recruiters, you got to go by your gut. You and I've been in the game long enough. Sometimes, they make it fool me. For the most part, I sometimes get sense, but sometimes you can't. So I always say this to the candidate that if you've got it down pat, you've memorized certain answers, certain things of that nature. A skill set is a skill set.
Mm.
It is something that it can be taught.
Okay, say that right then. Say that again. Say that again, because I need for when this is out on the platform. I need for everybody to get that. Say that again. That's so good.
Is a skill set.
That's so good.
It cannot always be taught.
That's so good.
It's different. Trading is one thing. Understand that. We can trade certain things. But let's just say if you have a high functional technical aptitude, skill set, where if it's someone else, they're smart, but their technical aptitude, it will show in your work. And that's when it comes into when we have to phone in, when we look at lots of other issues, compliance, retention. Talent acquisition looks at not only bringing on talent, but you want to retain. So it shows that you've done a disservice. It will show on the recruiter and it will show on the manager if they're able to fool the manager. That we bring someone in based on the skill set, so to speak, and they're able to fool us, and they get in the organization, and then we're firing them 3 months later.
Yeah.
I always, and I do, recruiters need to heavily build relationships and collaboration with their hiring managers, their hiring directors, their VPs, SVPs. It's critical that it's a bond, because recruiters are not going to all come in knowledgeable. We know that.
Yeah.
We're not engineers.
Right.
We are not, scientists. If you need a data scientist,
we're recruiting for that, but we're not going to necessarily have that specific skill set.
Exactly.
We recruit it. We know the job well enough to know how to get the person for you, but that's not our skill set.
Exactly. So it's understanding that job description, being able to ask the right questions, even the hard questions. Even if it is a department that it's rigid, it's hard, but you have to, it's honesty. At this point, it's on an honor scale. It's you when you say, what do you go by? Your gut. The recruiter's got a lot on them. They've got to really hone in and be like, does this particular person have the skill set? Versus just jargon.
Mm-hmm.
And initially, based on the answers, that's what you submit, and you submit it over. You have your conversation with your hiring manager, and the hiring manager. That's why it's always very critical, and that's usually with your upper level positions. Fast paced entry level, 9 times out of 10, it's okay. What you and I are talking about, those niche type skill sets where you may get it right, you may get it wrong. And it's a heavy impact on the organization. And that's where both the hiring manager and the recruiter, they need to be best friends. They need to be best friends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And really, when it comes to the second interview phase, whether it's a panel interview or it's one-on-one, that hiring manager definitely does need to delve in more, bring up hypothetical situations. It's more than just that somebody may have a skill set, because you can have the skill sets, but how would a particular person handle this in a high pressure situation?
Right.
This person may be extremely skilled, but you don't want someone that's going to then fold if there's an emergency.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's various different dynamics. And the reality is, as much as AI definitely, it does tap into a lot of the administrative functions. It does. It can even take care of certain things of background checks, all of the stuff that has held recruiters up, because we were so bogged down with handling administrative stuff and doing this and doing that AI does allow you to now really hold it to the candidate.
Yeah.
So it's no excuse. At the end of the day, as much as people say, oh, AI is really rigid, it's doing this and doing that, it's no longer with you and me having to sit to go through 500 resumes.
I know. That makes it worth it. Yes.
Paper applications, and you and I are like, oh my God. So AI is very, very, very useful. And it is the best tool to have within HR, not just recruitment. Talent. But we're looking at whether it's talent management, when we're looking at, training, when we're looking at promotional opportunities, when we're looking at, from the side of labor relations, things of that nature. So AI does help, with that aspect. What we have to remember and understand, that you have to still tap.
Still got to do it. Yeah, you still have to talk to the
candidate.
So
you ain't got to worry about the 500, but the 10 or the 5 that AI says, look, I've done blah, 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 blah. Don't be lazy. Don't be lazy. And that's the issue. I think lots of individuals still run with AI. They're going to let AI, and they may tap into with their candidate and say, blah blah blah. We saw blah blah. We see that you've screened well and you've met our parameters. My name's Tiffany Walker. You've been selected to interview on June 8th. This is the address where you need to go. Blah blah blah. That's not communication.
No.
You giving information of saying that they've now been selected to interview, and you're giving all of just the basic logistics with where to go when you arrive. I'll send you the panel members or who you're interviewing with. No, it's not enough. A lot of recruiters still do that. So what we need to do as recruiters, that even though AI has done all of the initial pre-screening, whether it's entry level, you have to, and that's what's been forgotten. You have to tap into that pulse. You do have to call that candidate.
Yeah.
We're in the age of when people don't want to talk no more. Everything is texting and it's whatever. Sorry. We were just talking about how pre-digital was, how it was networking. You were face to face. We know Gen Zers are on a total different platform. They don't like that. They don't even like if you're calling them. They're like, oh, I'm not picking this up. You better text me and tell me what the interview's about or whatever. We have to understand that because that's the dynamic. But the reality is, and it's up to the recruiter, you have to be bold.
Yeah.
Say, look, you have been identified. I need to talk to you.
Yeah.
I am not going to just do via text. The organization's not going to expect you to just do that. You can use that as an excuse. And the bottom line is if I have to keep chasing Keisha because Keisha's afraid to talk to me,
that's an issue.
That's a red flag.
That's an issue. Yeah, that's an issue. So I have one other question. We are at the close of the show, but I want to ask you, so looking ahead 5 years from now, what do you think recruiting will look like, from the candidate side, as well as from the recruiter side? And what should, both parties, start preparing for today, for then, looking, say, 5 years into the future, what that will look like?
Well, the way that I see it as the recruitment process is definitely significantly faster today, enabling companies or organizations to hire remotely because it does give you don't have to necessarily now worry about the demographics and things of that nature, but it does demand higher technical proficiency from recruiters. So that is the difference now. At one time it was definitely more manual. It's definitely more of a technological edge that I think recruiters need to look at. The future outlook, I think, is recruiters need to understand that organizations and companies now, it's an intentional workforce. Intentional, I mean, they know exactly what they want to do and how they want to do it. So as of like 2026, I think recruiting is becoming more micro-sized, where they are really looking at how that candidate is being engaged.
Mm-hmm.
They are really, really looking at that culture of the overall total engagement from how that candidate is approached, how they go through the process, and how they are brought on board into the organization. That is all very, very, very critical. So AI-driven career development is definitely the pathway. So recruiters definitely need to understand that even though it's definitely faster and it's ways of definitely eliminating unnecessary individuals that do not meet the mark. Those that are presented would need to definitely be able to go through a screening by the recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
So the recruiters need to look at that. It gives me more time to talk and be engaged with the candidate, the human being. No longer am I being responsible for tactical functions.
Right.
It does that for you, which I love, and it's awesome. What that recruiter then needs to do is, once AI gives that information over, you do your due diligence with calling those candidates or those at your top 5 and engaging, having a dialogue, talking about your organization, your company, the mission, the dynamic of that particular department that that candidate may be a part of, that hiring manager's management style, the dynamic of the office, the environment. What does a day look like in that office day to day? The recruiters to provide that foundation.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes what is lost. So when I think of what's been in the past and what's in the present, I think we need to, it merges together.
Well said.
Together.
Well said.
Faster mechanisms to help us, but now they still allow us to go back to how we used to do it in the old-fashioned way. Calling that candidate up, being personable, being engaged. And that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you guys all for joining us on this episode of Pull Up and Pour, where we discussed pretty much, gut feeling to algorithm, recruitment then and now. And thank you for having welcoming my guest here, Tiffany Walker. Tiffany, we're going to have you come back, and have another conversation about this. There were questions that I wanted to get to that I just simply didn't have a chance to because we just kind of simply ran out of time, which is a good thing. So thank you again. And to all of you out there, thank you for joining. Next week's episode will actually be about telehealth. We will talk to a young lady who actually started out owning her own med spa and now has turned it into a telehealth business. Okay. And she's out of Atlanta, but works nationwide. So I really want to, talk to her about that, ask her some things that when you were looking at telehealth, some things that you should kind of look at, what questions to ask. And I think it's going to be a great show. As always, this is your spot, your happy hour spot to be able to come up here, pull up and pour, bring whatever your beverage. Most of all, bring your heart, listen with your soul. Good evening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching Pull Up and Pour.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's today's Pull Up and Pour. Thanks for pulling up, showing up, and sharing space with us. If something resonated, don't hold it in. Share this episode, start the conversation, and come back next time with whatever's in your heart and in your glass. Because this is where we say it, sip it, and share it. And there's always room at the table. Until next time, take care, stay connected, and don't be a stranger.